This Day in Sports History. This episode is brought to you by Sterling Soap Company. Fellas, you've heard the phrase, look good, feel good, right? But why not add smell good to that too? That's where Sterling Soap Company comes in. First, Sterling Soap is 100% natural and has a wide variety of bath soaps, shave soaps, beard balm, lotions, and cologne. Second, there's a scent just for you. How about burgundy? Yeah, it's more than a color. The Sterling Soap folks blend natural essential oils with hints of mahogany, golden amber, and sandalwood. Or how about D503, an intensely masculine scent inspired by Legend by Mont Blanc. And third, you will feel good about the price. For just a little more than you'd pay at the grocery store, Sterling Soap will leave you feeling clean, refreshed, and ready for whatever's next. Give Sterling Soap a try today. Visit sterlingsoap.com. It's another day and another chance to go around the world of sports and check out what cool stuff happened on this day in history. This podcast is a member of the Sports History Network, and you can find more podcasts at sportshistorynetwork.com. It's November 10th, and on this day in 1928, Knute Rockne delivered his Win One for the Gipper speech. So yesterday I talked about the 1946 Army-Notre Dame game. Well, 18 years earlier, these two teams were squaring off in Yankee Stadium. Army was undefeated at 6-0. It had been an uncharacteristic year for the Irish. They'd lost 2 games already, and they were down 6-0 at the half. It was time for a little Knute Rockne magic. From his memory, he pulled out the Win One for the Gipper speech. George Gipp had been a Notre Dame star 8 years earlier. He was a consensus All-American in the 1920 season. Well, during a game against Northwestern on November 20th, 1920, Gipp came down with strep throat. He was later admitted to the hospital, and he died less than a month later on December 14th from strep and pneumonia. As Rockne recounted on this day in 28, George Gipp said these words in his final hours, dramatized in the 1940 movie Knute Rockne All-American, with future President Ronald Reagan playing the role of Gipp.
Rock, someday when the team's up against it, brakes are beating the boys, ask them to go in there with all they've got. Win just one for the Gipper. I don't know where I'll be then, but I'll know about it. I'll be happy.
An assistant coach for the Irish in the 1928 season, Ed Healy, recounted later that after Rockne delivered those words, there was not a dry eye in the room. And when Coach Rockne sent the boys back out for the second half, the boys nearly ripped the hinges off the door. Jack Chevenix, who would later be killed on Iwo Jima in World War II, scored the first touchdown for the Irish. As he crossed the goal line, he repeatedly yelled, "There's one for the Gipper!" The Irish added another touchdown later in the game and held Army off the scoreboard the rest of the way to, indeed, win one for the Gipper, 12-6. On this day in 1984, it's not known if there was an impassioned halftime speech, but the Maryland Terrapins pulled off an amazing 31-point comeback against the defending national champion Miami Hurricanes. Miami was riding a nice little crest of a wave. They'd won 5 straight and had moved up to number 6 in the country. The Maryland Terrapins were unranked, but had won 3 straight coming into this one. This was a definite tale of 2 halves. Miami opened the scoring in the first quarter with a touchdown and then added 3 more and a field goal in the second quarter behind the passing of Bernie Kosar to take a 31-0 lead into the locker room at halftime. Maryland coach Bobby Ross needed to shake some things up, and so he pulled starting quarterback Stan Gelbaugh, and he put in Frank Reich. The Terps scored touchdowns on their first 3 drives, but it was still 34-21 with 15 minutes to play. When Tommy Neal scored on a 14-yard sweep, the Canes' lead was down to just 6. After the Maryland defense forced another Miami punt, Reich went back to the air. Here's Mike Patrick with the call from that day.
First down, Maryland at the 32. Reich to throw again off of play action. Throwing deep, and he's got a man out there, Hill! Greg Hill on the tip, and it's a touchdown!
That 68-yard touchdown and the PAT gave the Terps their first lead with 5.5 minutes left in the game. Adding to the misery, Miami fumbled the ensuing kickoff, and Maryland recovered at the Canes' 6. 2 plays later, Maryland scored again. And here's Mike Patrick again.
The give to Badonic off the left side to the one. Touchdown by Maryland. All of those weapons that Maryland had that they didn't use, all the guns that didn't go off in the first half. It's been rapid fire here.
But it wasn't over quite yet. Miami blocked a punt deep in Terrapins territory and turned that into a touchdown a few plays later. The 2-point conversion was snuffed, and Maryland held on for the 42-40 win at the Orange Bowl. At the time, the 31-point deficit was the largest ever overcome to win a college football game and would stay that way until 2006, when Michigan State pulled off the greatest comeback in college football history with their 35-point comeback against Northwestern that we talked about back on October 21st. Are you a hockey fan? Then you'll love Eric Zweig's new book, Hockey Hall of Fame True Stories 2. It's a treasure trove of untold tales, bizarre incidents, and captivating trivia that will leave even the most devoted puckhead astounded. The intense rivalries, epic showdowns, and historic clashes that shaped the NHL's early years, it's all in there. Zweig uncovers the true stories that helped shape the sport, ensuring that you will never look at hockey the same way again. Check out Hockey Hall of Fame True Stories 2 on Amazon or wherever fine books are sold. On this day in 2018, it was the Davidson Wildcats putting up big numbers on the stat sheet, but they fell a little short on the scoreboard. Davidson is a non-scholarship FCS school that plays in the Pioneer Football League, and they love to run the football. Earlier in the season, the Wildcats, more well known as Steph Curry's alma mater than for doing anything on the gridiron, had already set the FCS record for rushing yards when they rolled up 685 in a 91-61 win over Division III's Guilford. Well, on this day, they set the all-divisions record by rushing for 789 yards against the San Diego Toreros. 4 Davidson running backs had at least 150 yards. Wesley Duggar had 231, William Wicks rolled up 199, Tyler Phelps had 159, and Keelan Brown had 150. It was just the second time in FCS history that 4 guys had rushed for more than 100. But all of those numbers did not add up to a win for the Wildcats. Instead, it was a 56-52 loss as the Toreros secured the PFL championship. The two teams combined for 1,477 yards, which you would think would have been a record of some sort as well, but that was 72 yards short of the FCS record for combined total yards, which is 1,549. This was a historic day in 1957 when golfer Charlie Sifford became the first black player to win a professional golf tournament. The 34-year-old Sifford was playing in the Long Beach Open. In his bag was a putter that the boxer Joe Louis had given him. The tournament was just 54 holes instead of the standard 72 and was not an officially recognized PGA Tour event. Of course, that was the only reason that Sifford was even playing on this day. The PGA Tour barred non-whites from being members and playing in its tournaments. It would not be for another 4 years until the Caucasian-only clause was removed, which also happened on this day in 1961. Well, on this day in 57, Sifford beat Eric Monti in a 3-hole playoff. Now, it's important to note that Sifford was not the first black player to play in a professional golf tournament. That distinction belongs to Bill Spiller, who competed in the 1948 Los Angeles Open, which, similar to the Long Beach Open, was a 54-hole event and not a part of the PGA Tour. Spiller played well enough, though, to qualify to play the following week at the Richmond Open in Oakland, which was a PGA Tour event. However, he was barred from playing because of the color of his skin. On this day in 1985, it was an amazing and record-setting end to the Atlanta Falcons-Philadelphia Eagles game. In what was a harbinger of things to come a few weeks later, the Eagles coughed up a 17-0 lead in the fourth quarter to a dismal one-win Falcons team. Atlanta tied it up and the game went to overtime. The game ended pretty quickly, foreshadowing of my own. The Falcons had pinned the Eagles deep in their own end at the 1-yard line. Without a doubt, the Falcons were thinking run on the first play to just get some room to work, right? Well, instead, quarterback Ron Jaworski hit his favorite target, Mike Quick, on a slant, and he ran it in for a 99-yard touchdown. Now, Quick is very emphatic that when asked about the play years later, that it was not a 99-yard Jaworski touchdown pass. It was Jaws throwing the ball about 20 yards and Quick running the final 79 for the score. Either way you add it up, it was and still is the longest play to end a game in the NFL. On this day in 1991, it was another fireworks incident inside a dome that disrupted play, this time in the New Orleans Superdome. The New Orleans Saints were playing the San Francisco 49ers. Midway through the third quarter with the Saints up 7-3, people's attention started to turn towards a small blaze swirling up in the rafters. One of the fireworks from the halftime fireworks show had ignited a burlap bag used to insulate support wires in the dome's gondola. A technician attempted to put the fire out but seemed to only be fanning the flames instead. Pieces of the burning burlap started to fall to the turf. With Morton Anderson lining up for a short field goal, officials paused the game to put out a burning piece on the field. Ice was thrown on it, it got a Gatorade bath, a fireman doused it with an extinguisher, and the game was delayed about 8 minutes to clean up the field. Anderson said later that, he's used to getting iced as a kicker, but he'd never been roasted. He finally got his chance to kick it, and he knocked it through. If only the actual fire had lit a figurative fire into either team's offense. But it did not. The game ended with the Saints winning 10-7. And time now for today's Nothing to Do with Sports fun fact. The actress Grace Kelly was initially cast to play the role of Marnie in Alfred Hitchcock's movie of the same name. The character was a troubled young woman who was a kleptomaniac. Her husband, Prince Rainier of Monaco, had no problem with her playing the role, but the people of Monaco did. They did not want their princess to play the role of a thief, and so the role went to Tippi Hedren. That's all I've got for you today. More tomorrow on This Day in Sports History. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.